This is Deb, and I have a little project that I want to show you that I'm going to demonstrate. This is made out of balsa wood, and it's just a little country seat that you put in a foyer. And I'm going to put this in my dollhouse that I'm working on, 1930s dollhouse. This image in the back is actually a painting that I did years ago. Of course, it's quite a bit bigger. And I photographed these paintings, and now I'm using them in my dollhouse and framing them. But this one I decided to put on the back of this seat, and it has a little velvet pillow. So I'll show you how I made this, and we'll just get started. I made a template out of cardboard, waste cardboard, and drew it onto the balsa wood, as you see. And later on I do actually add one more piece to this, but you'll see that it's after I paint it. But as it is now, you could put this together without any problem. It'll be sturdy and stable. So if you just wanted to use the 4 pieces that you see here, you can do that. I got this idea off the internet. I saw a life-sized folk art bench that was very similar to this, with a painting on the back that faces the cushion. And I thought, wow, that would fit into my dollhouse foyer that I'm making, the dollhouse that I'm making, that is. And it does go with the 1933 to 36 theme that I'm keeping, because there was a revival of early American or colonial style furniture during the 30s, right up into the late 50s, where they called it early American furniture. And even into the 60s, people were still buying that early American style furniture for their homes. But the theme was most apparent in the 30s and 40s. It was very popular. So this fits in, even though all the furniture in the house would not be classified as early American. Most of it is, though. It has its roots in that. And I am building a dollhouse. I am also fixing my Keystone dollhouse, but the furniture that I'm making is 1/12 size. And the Keystone dollhouse is really too small for 1/12. It looks like it's 1/16 furniture that should go in it. But I'm going to stick with making 1/12 furniture for now. And when I get ready to completely restore that dollhouse, then I'll think about how I'm going to furnish that. But that's going to be in the future now, because I'm still waiting for parts. I'm trying to find original parts for it, windows and other things to restore that. Some things I'll be fixing myself on that as well. So I'm actually making a dollhouse, but I don't have room to film it. I'm making it in my hallway upstairs, and it's too narrow for me to actually get any good shots. So as soon as I get to the point where I can take it downstairs and my Christmas stuff is gone, then I'll start showing that. It will have 4 rooms, a bathroom, a foyer, and a staircase right in the middle. And I'm building it so that it opens from the front rather than having it open in the back. But you'll see it soon. Or you'll see my progress soon. This is the back I'm cutting now. And I'm just going over the lines a couple of times and then cutting it so that I don't split it. I sort of test it here and there to see if it's actually cut through enough, and if it isn't, I don't force it. I just go right back and go over it again. There. And as it is now, you could glue this together and it'll be a stable bench. But I did take it a little further, and you'll see that later on after I paint it. Looks like all the pieces are even. And then I'm going to glue this together after I figure out exactly where the seat is going to go, and that has to be level. And it is 1/12, so it has to fit the dolls. And I already tested that on the cardboard one. But I didn't film that to make sure it was the right scale. So this will just be lined up, and the seat will be lined up just above that line. I really admire some of the people out there that are making doll furniture and accessories that are 1/12 and smaller. There's some amazing artists out there, and I so enjoy watching them work. Queen City Miniatures is one of my favorite sites to look at. She is just an amazing artist. I'm sure most of you are familiar with her. She does some wonderful miniatures. And her how-to videos are also really clean. That's why she has so many followers, because she's really good at this. And she should have more followers, actually. Okay, I'm just going to put that seat in. And I'm using the glue that I always use, which is DAP. And I like this, the applicator on the end, because it's narrow and it helps you to line up the glue on the surface of the edge. It makes it a little easier. It's nice and flat, and you can just squeeze it out, and you can get a thin line or a thick line. Now the pins that I'm using here are not corsage pins. These are actually quilting pins. So they're a little thinner than the ones I've used in previous videos where the wood was more substantial, but I didn't want to crack it, so I'm using a thinner pin, a finer pin, so that doesn't happen. But I do have to be a little more careful when I push them in so I don't bend them or split the wood from the edge, so you have to center them and push them in. This is the way I do it. I wouldn't use the wood clamps for this because they will tend to dent the wood. Too much pressure. So pins seem to be, for me, the solution to that. If I was using harder woods like basswood or, I don't know, the other ones, there's another one people use, can't think of the name of it right offhand, but you know, then you would be able to use clamps. Maybe there are clamps out there that aren't so rough on the wood, but I don't own them, so this is how I'm doing it. And I'll just finish this side up. Make sure it's lined up so that the entire thing is flush. The back is flush with the sides and so on. And as I said, I am going to change the back a little bit, the legs on the back later, and I actually add a piece to the front, but you'll see that as I go along. I'll let that dry for 24 hours, and I did, and there we are again. Now I'm going to sand. I'm using a rougher sandpaper first, which is 600, and then I will go over the whole thing again with a 1500 fine sandpaper before I paint it. And then I sand in between the painting too at times if it needs it. It's important to sand it because you'll have rough edges if you're using balsa wood, and it just won't look finished unless you sand it. This is a very quiet video. I'm not adding music in the internal part of the video. I'm trying to get away from too much music, although I like music. So it's hard for me to let that go, but I think it's best in some circumstances to just use it judiciously and sparsely. But I could change my mind later. I often do. I just roll the sandpaper to go into those areas that are circular. That seems to work out just fine. I just double it over and roll it up and go in there and sand it off. Just have to make sure it's even on both sides, because you can get carried away and sand a little too much off with balsa wood. It's just so soft. Make sure it's even. And when you're working small mistakes really show up. But I'm not that fussy either. I'm just, I'm not interested in having something that's perfect, because I can't make anything perfect. So I try, but, I'm not going to get there. So I'll settle for good. Anyway, I'm going to paint it now. I'm just using apple barrel paint, raw sienna. I'm actually mixing a little bit of the wood glue into it for the first coat. And I've noticed that if you do that, it hardens the wood a bit, makes it a little more durable. So that wood glue seeps in and hardens it up, but it doesn't change the color of the paint. So I'll just go over it with that first coat with some wood glue. About a third of it is wood glue. Mixed it very well. I'll just coat everything. And then when that dries, I will give it a sand and put some more coats on. We'll see how many I need. And then at the end, of course, I'll do some touch-ups. Just have to make sure I get it into all the little cracks. The apple barrel matte finish paint fills in lots of little cracks pretty well. Makes it look more solid. And the pinholes will be covered with that as well. So you won't see them. They disappear. It would be cute in red too, this bench, but I wanted to keep the wood colors similar. So I'm going with the same color I used on the couches and some of the clocks that I made in a table for the foyer that I actually had. I didn't make the table. It was an older table that I had picked up with the paint missing on it, and I repainted it, but you'll see it later. Not in this film, but down the road. I'm just putting a bigger pin in the bottom, so a couple of them, so I can paint the back of it without getting my hands too filled with paint. Now, you didn't see me do this, but I cut off the edge of the back so it went straight across instead of having a triangular leg in the back. So I don't know if you could quite catch that, but you will see. So I ended up cutting it off straight across in the back. And now I'm using a finer sandpaper to sand the paint, especially the back part where the picture is going to go. I think you can see that it's straight across now. So there's just the two sides are acting as legs, and I just thought it looked better. But you could leave them. Just dust it off, and then I'll paint it again. Now I'm going to fit the picture. Now the picture wasn't really big enough because originally it was a painting. It was about 24 by 20 inches, something like that. Actually, no, I think it's 30 by 20 inches, something like that. But anyway, and so I ended up having to take some colored pencils and draw in the bottom of it so that it would look like a larger picture. But I glued it in first, and then I took my Inktense pencils and drew the painting down further. So I did that by hand, and you'll notice it in the final picture. I'm just using tacky glue to glue it in. And make sure I get good coverage with it and press it down so there's no wrinkles. That's the thing that would ruin it, is if you wrinkled the paper. And I managed to get it in there without any wrinkles, and I'll just clean up the glue. Just rubbing it down with my dry hands to make sure that it will dry flat. And I'm just going to sand around a little bit more here. And I just have to be careful not to rub the back of it and scratch it. But I'll touch all this up later again after everything is dry. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually draw in the rest of the picture over that green part with Inktense pencils. But I didn't record that. I forgot. But you'll see that it's drawn in afterwards, and it's just a continuation of the same hills and greenery that go down to meet the bottom. And I'm just taking a bookbinding tool to make sure the edges are pushed down flat. Of course, when it dries, it'll stretch a little better. And I'm using something to coat it, and I didn't show that, but I do put a coating on it. Now what I'm going to do here is pick the color for the little cushion that I'm going to make. And I ended up going with the blue instead of the green. And I just sewed it all around. I measured, and I just very careful not to overstuff it. And once I sewed it and put it in place, I actually glued it down. But you can see where I drew a continuation of that image. It's, if I didn't tell you, you might not have noticed the line that goes through it. I couldn't get rid of the line, but I thought, well, it's not perfect, but the next time I make one of these, I'll make sure that I make the image a little more seamless. But I decided not to use the green. It was a hard decision, but it just didn't have that pop of color. Well, here's the finished product. I ended up putting some cord around the whole back of it to close it up. You can just barely see the black cord. Well, thank you for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment. Bye bye.